Good afternoon. Demetri here from Real Estate Relief. I want to have somebody on the show soon who's a mobile home parks expert, and that's the new affordable housing.
Hey, Demetri, how's it going? Good.
All right, man. Sorry for not sending this sooner, but thanks for having the time today to be on the show. So what I have here is I call it the Relief Podcast, extension of Real Estate Relief, my real estate investment company. And what we're looking to do is kind of share stories. And obviously, you're very experienced at your field, and that's really something like I've admired for a while. Like I forget the gentleman, but in Chicago, I went to one of those mobile home park shows.
Oh, okay.
And do you know who I'm talking about?
You went to, was it someone's like seminar or something?
Yeah. I went to one of these seminars, right? And they took us to the south side of Chicago, right? And mind you, it's a bunch of investors or aspiring investors just touring through not the most sightly parts of town. And sure enough, a police officer followed us. They're like, "Are you guys lost?" They're like, "No, the teacher owns this park." So whenever you're ready, we can get started. But so what I'd like you to do is just kind of just introduce yourself and
Sure.
who you are, what your company is, and some of your story, and perhaps share some struggles along the journey that to inspire others who are kind of aspiring to be where you are for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll introduce myself as we start, and then you can kind of, wherever you want me to go from there, you can let me know.
All right. So tell us more about like what you do and how you serve the real estate community with all the work that you do. And obviously, we also want to know what your goals are for this year in terms of like what kind of audiences you want to impact, perhaps how many parks you want to acquire, which states you want to focus on, because some people prefer some states more than others.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for having me on, Demetri. I appreciate it. And I'm Derek Vickers. I'm the CEO and owner of Victory Real Estate Group. We own and operate just under 2,000 units. We'll be over 2,000 in the next couple of months. We just got a deal under contract this morning, actually. So we're ready to expand, and we own and operate mobile home parks in the Southeast. We like to buy value add deals, parks that are run down, your quintessential trailer park, and we turn them into a mobile home park, is what I like to say. And I started in this business in 2020, so it's been relatively short. Bought my first park, and we can get into how this is how serendipitous this first deal was. And that was in September of 2020. So we've grown pretty fast here in the last few years. I'm originally from Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, a little town called Grottoes, 1,000 people, didn't know anybody, grew up in a middle-class family, wasn't well off, didn't know anybody that was wealthy. I didn't graduate from college. I clearly don't have, a Harvard MBA or anything like that. I probably still pronounce things incorrectly, but that's okay, because you don't need to have all that to become successful in real estate. And Demetri, you can cut in if there's anything you want to ask a question about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to ask you, like, what motivated you to invest in mobile home parks as opposed to all the other classes of real estate?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in 2015, I actually was looking for, this is kind of funny. So I thought that, people that had like, 9-figure wealth and things like that, I thought they got paid a W-2 that said 100 million. And I actually was listening to Grant Cardone's real estate show, and he talked about how, wealthy people own assets. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I started watching his real estate show where he teaches you how to underwrite apartments. I started looking at apartments. I'm like, man, like this makes a lot of sense. People pay rent. Property value goes up over time. Just made a lot of sense for me. It was very simple. I'm a simple guy, so it was very easy. And so I started looking at deals, but it wasn't until 2020 that when I was in the insurance business and that business got shut down theoretically by COVID, our revenue went to basically nothing. And So I was like, dude, I got to get this real estate thing going. Started looking at apartments. I didn't want to buy a duplex or just one home or anything and rent it. I wanted some scale. And I realized I wasn't going to do that in apartments because in Orlando, they were 200 grand a door. Right. I was like, yeah, I couldn't even think with raising, 20,000 bucks at the time. Like I couldn't even think with that. And so my buddy was investing in mobile home parks, and I actually called him. I was like, hey man, I got 50 grand. I saved it up when my insurance business, this was in 2020. And I was like, hey, I want to invest it with you. And he basically said, dude, you don't have enough money to invest with me. And I was like, screw you, man. I'm going to go do this shit myself. But and I found mobile home parks after I started looking at it. I love the asset class, the supply and demand factor, because there's a dwindling supply of them and there's an increasing demand because of the affordable housing aspect. Because there's parks that are getting scraped every year for guys that want to build duplexes and condos and industrial complexes, whatever. So I love that. And because it's the cheapest place in town typically, it is recession resistant. I know you hear that a lot in, terms or whatever in the real estate space. But so think about it. The cheapest place in town, you're always going to have demand for that. If the economy goes up, then the people down, they're going to come up. And if the economy goes down, it's just it's resistant in that fact. So that's what attracted to me to it. And also one more thing on that, Demetri, was the mom and pop owner aspect, the fragmentation of the business. I could go buy from a mom and pop and there was still a ton of upside in these deals.
Right. I mean, I imagine if someone's owned this park for 30 or 40 years, it's already been paid off. And no one formalized how to run this place. They may not have property management software. They may be fixing the place themselves, and so I imagine the question you like to ask a seller is, how many more years do you want to be the one fixing the toilets?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a deal that we're working right now, a guy with an RV park. When I met with him on site, I'm like, so where's the rent roll? Who's paying what? And he goes, he knows there's like 73 units in here, and he knows who's in each home. He knows supposedly how much they pay, because it's not levelized. People pay different amounts. And people pay on different days because they moved in on different days. I'm like, how the hell you remember all this stuff? So
I don't know how
there's
together.
definitely, I don't know how.
I mean, so when you evaluate the potential for a mobile home park, right? Walk us through some of the due diligence that you go through when you evaluate whether you should acquire a park.
Yeah, and so great question, because the due diligence process is massively important. Yes, you're going to do your underwriting and make sure the deal pencils via numbers, right? If you have a real estate audience, they know how to do that, I'm assuming. But when you're going to buy these deals, like the due diligence on the infrastructure, because the infrastructure on these parks can kill you, because most apartments and things that you buy are city water and sewer. Mobile home parks, it's not necessarily like that. There's wells, there's septic, there's treatment plants, there's lagoons. There could be city water and city sewer, but the pipes could be old, because a lot of these parks were developed we have a park that was developed in 48. So it's old, right? 40s, 50s, 60s, the infrastructure lifespan of these deals is going out. So a lot of this stuff, you can't prevent. You just need to understand, if you know about it, like the well, when was it built? When was the last time it was replaced? I've got a whole list on this. The septics, you need to go to the park when it rains and see if there's any poop on the top of the ground somewhere, because that'll happen, right? And you want to go around and ask the residents, here's a perfect example of this. We were looking at a deal about an hour from where I am now. And sorry, I'm not in the actual studio, by the way. I'm actually traveling, looking at deals. So I'm in a little hotel room right now. But I drove through the park, and there was a tenant there. And I'm like, hey, I'm moving my parents into the park. What's the scoop here? Should I move here? He's like, oh, no, dude, I've been having septic problems. It smells like crap every morning that I get up. And I'm like, oh, okay. There's a known issue that the seller is definitely not going to tell you. But using, I guess, to get back to your question, sorry to get off, but like looking at the infrastructure and getting a well contractor, a septic contractor, a plumbing contractor to come out and really understand what the infrastructure is like, if there's anything that's broken, what it would actually cost to fix it, and even more importantly, if you can fix it. Because sometimes with the new regulations and setbacks, you can't put a new well into a park. You have to tie into the city. And what if the city is a mile run down the road? Well, that's a 7-figure job. You ain't buying that park, my guess. So the infrastructure is
I
huge in
know.
knowing and understanding that.
I mean, when you said lagoon, I immediately thought blue lagoon, but these are definitely not blue.
Definitely not blue.
These
Not
are
at all.
No, these are ways to treat all the septic and sewage that comes through. And when I learned
Correct.
things like open pit, it sounded disgusting. And
Ugh.
then even sometimes the pipes that they use, they're not PVC, right?
No.
They have these kind of pipes that might rot or fall apart, and so that deal may not be a deal if it costs you so much to basically bring it to livable standards, because the
Yep.
mom and pop operator just kind of let things go because nobody bothered them. But when there's a
Yeah.
change of hands, sometimes you need occupancy permits. You need that the town is inviting themselves over to kind of give their blessing before the sale goes through. And
Yeah.
I mean, talk to me about the maintenance. So, like, once you take a deal down, you go through and you improve it and bring it to good standards, and now you're managing and operating this place. How do you go about setting a rent that pays you well, but then still fits the affordable part of what a mobile home park is intended for? And what's your typical maintenance and upkeep for a park?
Yeah, so great question. So on all of our parks that are more stabilized, like we're running, our rule of thumb is 35%. Now, the longer that park seasons, the more that the rent increases. Now with inflation, I mean, freaking, prices of stuff and like stuff like trash is just ridiculous. So, but in theory, your expense ratio is going to go down more as the park seasons and rents go up because they're typically going to outpace like your expense increases every year. And so I'm looking at 30 to 35% expenses, depending on if there's more private utilities like the wastewater system or the septic system. I'm going to run at 40% expenses. And so that's my rule of thumb, and I can dive into that a little bit more. But as far as like deciding what the rent amount should be, I buy only in top markets, Tampa, Orlando, around Charlotte, North Carolina, like places like that. And so the to live in the hood in Tampa is $1,500 in a bad neighborhood in a small place, right? So we're usually half of that, right? We're half of what a 2-bedroom apartment, average 2-bedroom is. Average 2-bedroom in Florida, I think, particularly, I think it's like $1,700, $1,800. So you're going to be half of that in lot rent typically. Sometimes more than half
Yeah, I
a
mean,
percentage.
well, I mean, the fact that you're under $1,000 and you give somebody a stable place to live, it's a beautiful thing. Because I've gone to Florida at least 15 times in the last few years. Right,
Yeah,
scouting for real estate deals, and then always looking for. I've stayed in Airbnbs that cost $1,000 a month or more.
easy.
Right,
Yeah.
and rather than that, you say, okay, have the stability of the same place. Right, so do you rent the mobile home parks or do you sell the units to people?
No, we
Like
actually
you
no,
rent the
we sell
land
the
and,
units.
and the unit? Okay.
No, we try to
So
get
then
rid
you
of the
then
units. Sorry, go ahead. What were you gonna ask?
there's so by selling the unit, right? So talk to us about the benefits of that, and then what would be the responsibility of the person who buys the unit from you?
Yeah, so now that so there's two schools of thought. Now you could, so if you're in a market, let's say you're in like a Mississippi market and your lot rent is $300, but your home rent is 900 and combined it's 1,200. In that case, I would probably rather rent, right? Than just own the lot and have them pay lot rent. Right. But if you're in a market like Tampa, and people even justify this in Tampa because there's people renting mobile homes for crazy amounts that you wouldn't believe in Tampa. But the argument, um, I like to not own the homes because of the expenses, right? The maintenance expenses that would come with that. It's just basically a horizontal apartment at that point. Um, and you got to have a maintenance guy on site to handle that stuff, right? So, the benefit of selling the homes is that my expense ratio is going to go about from 50 to 55% down to 30 to 35%, right? And so the NOI is just going to grow by, sheer just the way you're doing things, right? Um, and I also like that too, is because the tenant gets a sense of pride of ownership because they own the home. They want to keep it nice. They may fix up the yard. People that rent, they don't give a shit. Like they're just going to go in and tear it up. They don't care. They don't plant flowers out front. They don't put a nice white fence around the lot. Um, our tenants do that. And I think it's more of a partnership with us. From a tenant perspective, it's more of a partnership when they own the home and we own the park, because they're going to do that stuff. And it's in their best interest to do that and keep the park nice, because if they want to sell their house, they can sell it for more if the park is in better shape. If it's a dump, then no one's going to freaking buy their house for a premium, right? But if the park is nice and there's good neighbors and good tenants, like people are going to pay more for that. And also, too, I like buying parks when they're rental units, and I like going in and converting them because then I can basically just reallocate more lot rent, give them the home. They're paying less than what they were paying before, but now they own the home, a home that I could have sold for tens of thousands of dollars. So it's a good deal for them. It's a good deal for me. And the value of the property goes up tremendously at that point. And plus, and from doing that, I'll go in and then pave the roads, put new lights up, put a fence, sign, get out the druggies and all the dumb stuff, and increase the value and the just the livability for everybody.
Right. I mean, that's wonderful because you basically have a small community on your hands, and if
Yes.
you're able to clean out the trash, whether it be littering or the wrong people, that's good because you're honest people who bought a unit from you. If their next door neighbors doesn't have it together and can't get it better, they got to go. And so, talk to me about eviction procedures, right? Like, do you encounter any kind of legal challenges, or is it pretty effortless in the states that you operate that if someone doesn't belong there, they leave?
Yeah, so great question. So if you're renting units, it's just like an apartment. If somebody doesn't pay, you can evict them. But if I sell a home to someone that's a bad dude because we didn't do our job on the background checks or something, then it can be hell to get them out, because if they own their mobile home, it's just different and it takes longer. And they could be selling meth and cooking meth in their house. And right, you really got to prove it, right? It would take you a decent amount of time, 6 to 12 months, to get that person out, especially if it wasn't provable, right? It would be difficult and you may not even get to do it. So there is a downside as far as doing if the tenants own the homes. But I may have lost you there, Demetri, but I'm going to keep going. But the eviction process is fine if it's your rentals, but you still run into issues here and there. But that's just the nature of being a freaking landlord.
Oh yeah, I mean up north here in Philadelphia, the eviction procedures have changed heavily in favor of the tenant. And then they get rights and they get additional time, and sometimes that 3 month falling behind becomes 6 months of free living. And when you calculate your ratios and how you're going to get a rate of return on your property, I think this needs to be a new consideration that, hey, we might have a tenant who just hangs out too long, or someone who doesn't pay the lot rent for 6 months, and because the place is profitable enough, you can absorb a few of these units, right? Because how many units would be your average mobile home park?
It's about 40, 20, 45. 45 in there.
Yeah. So then if you have So if you have 10% vacancy or non-paying, you'll hang on okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the thing too about the eviction stuff is like, I know people want to get all heartfelt, but like I try to do cash for keys when I'm getting somebody out. Like we'll pay them cash to go if they're not going to make it, right? And for people that the politicians and things have never owned a property and never dealt with tenants, like they don't know this. To actually get evicted, right? You got to be a pretty big ass. Let's just call it what it is. Because to go the whole process, and the owners offered you many outs and many solutions, because we do. If it gets all the way to eviction, you're a pretty nasty person. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, would you agree with that? To get to the point where the sheriff's showing
Yeah,
up
I
at your
mean,
door, where the sheriff's got to show up to get you
you
out.
really, yeah, that's just avoiding responsibility. Like
Absolutely.
you got responsibilities. When you go to the grocery store, you don't say, "I'm short, I'm good for it." No, you either pay up or leave. Like, and the same
Exactly.
thing with rent. Like, please pay the rent, or let me know that you can't. Now, if there's a couple weeks or even a month where I'm going to lose that rent, fine, but be on your way, please. Right? Like,
Yeah,
we have bills too, right? And if a place
for
is
sure.
negative, that comes out of our savings. That hurts
Yeah.
our families, our community, the causes that we want to support, right? And again, the person who doesn't pay lives in their excuses. But
Yep.
for people like us, we're running a business. We're improving areas. You're taking, as Florida is improving everywhere, you're taking that part of town that they're like, oh, should it still be zoned as a mobile home park, right?
Yeah.
Because you have gentrification and HOAs and all this expensive housing everywhere, and luxury apartments and luxury that, and it's very expensive to enter Florida. And the
Yeah.
average person who worked at a factory, a blue collar person, says, you know what? As long as I have a trailer and I'm 10 minutes to the beach, I'm happy, right?
Yep.
And there's mobile home parks all over Sarasota area, Orlando area, Tampa area. Again,
Oh
if you're
yeah.
not stuck on having the biggest house on the block, you can be near the action in a mobile home park, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with living there. I
No.
mean, talk to me
No,
about
not
some
at
of the
all.
high income people. Talk to me about some high income people who might be renting lot space in your areas. Like, do you have any doctors? Do you
Yeah,
have any
so
lawyers? Any professionals?
we have a park and it's right outside of Orlando. It's in a ridiculous location. So like there's literally, Fleming's and Whole Foods, and Ruth Chris is like a mile down the road. Right. So we have some nurses,
Mhm.
some business owners that live in there. It's a nice park. The lot rent's higher. Just because the location is just crazy. And yeah, we have some of those type of people that live in there. Most of our communities that we've got, good, solid working class people that they don't, they may not want to be billionaires, but they just want to, mind their business, be, 30 minutes from the beach. They want to be close to everything, close to the action. And they just, but I know we don't own, I know in some 5-star communities there's like higher end people that live there, but we don't have any 5-star communities. We have our best community is probably a 4-star, just under a 4-star community or so.
Okay, but it's definitely family friendly.
Yep.
People can more or less feel safe there. As you said, like if and sometimes in these communities, the neighborhood, you might have appoint somebody to be kind of like the head of the neighborhood, right?
Yes.
And be
Yeah.
like your neighborhood watch. And if they're seeing something that's not right, we gotta let you know. Please let me know right away as soon as something's not right, so we can address it. I
For
imagine that
sure.
happens in your community, so that you can keep the culture good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to have that. You have to have
Now, when
someone
you
there.
when
I think we're lagging a little bit or something.
now tell me how, like, when you, oh, sorry for the delay, but let's say when you approach that retiring couple who's been holding that place for 20, 30, 40 years, and they've done a great job doing what they can with it, but they can only bring you so far. Who initiates the contact? Is it you who contacts them, or they kind of reach out to you and say, yeah, it's time for me to move on?
Well, typically they don't reach out to you. Sometimes if we send mailers out, they'll reach out to us, but it's usually me or my team doing the initial reach out. It's more my acquisitions team now that's handling most of the acquisition calls and things, and I'll jump on a call because I love talking to mom and pop. I'm from a small town. I know how to talk to these people, and I enjoy it. I enjoy hearing the stories and how they got the park and, all the stuff that's happened and the little stories about, Johnny in lot 15 and Susie in lot 40. Like, it's fun to me. I'm actually going to do it on a deal next week. And I just enjoy learning that stuff, but it's usually my team doing it first, and then I'll jump on the call second for an interested party.
Wow. So there's a process in place to kind of filter out which opportunities need to be brought to your attention, and where we can maybe find some middle ground and advance to a deal. Because as well as these places profit, it's a effort of time, and as people get older, time's more precious. So why not take this wonderful asset that you've built and developed, and then just turn it over to the next generation that'll take good care of it. In fact, they'll find ways to add value, as you've said, so that the place continues to be a beautiful place that they started, and that you continue. And then they can retire in Florida. I mean, where else is it better to retire? Like,
Where's there better to retire?
Sell to you? No, it doesn't exist. I mean, pick your beach, whether it be on the west side, Clearwater, on the east side, Vero Beach, or even down to Miami, where it never snows. It might get cold first thing in the morning in Orlando, but then it warms up. And of course, you have Disney and all the wonderful attractions nearby. So whether you got visitors, people who migrate there, I mean, they're moving in from everywhere, right? All over the country, they're moving out to Florida now.
For sure, they are. The traffic's getting worse and worse.
It is, yeah. That's the downside of it, is that mass transit, train. I mean, there are buses, but who takes a bus? You gotta pick up on traffic patterns. When's the best time to be on the 275 or the 75? And head this way, head that way. Sometimes you're like, oh, thank goodness I'm not going the other direction, because I would have lost an extra hour.
For sure.
But then when you get to that beach, right? I was there New Year's Eve, right? And you hear a drum circle. And again, I'm not dancing, but that day I was dancing. I'm like, what a wonderful way to end the year. When evaluating deals, right? And then, what would you tell somebody before they get their first deal? Like, what one thing that they need to look out for so they don't get caught?
Yeah, so you need to look out for, like, zoning issues. Like, if the park is really even supposed to be there or allowed to be there, like, there could be a zoning issue or boundary issues. And then, so that's big. And then the infrastructure thing that I talked about earlier, like, you need to understand what that infrastructure looks like, and also if it needs to be replaced. Like, if you have septic, for example, and you need to replace a septic, can you actually do that? Like, you need to find out if you can replace it if it goes bad. It may never go bad, but if it does and you can't replace it and you have to hook in the city, that can be a massive expense. And so I would just look out for that kind of stuff.
Wow. So if people have more questions on either how to acquire a mobile home park, or maybe they want to kind of work with you to maybe sell their mobile home park, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm not hard to find. I'm on every social media platform at Derek Vickers 885, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of them. I'm on X. I've got a podcast, the MHP show, that I do every Monday. It's either me running my mouth or I'm talking with someone else that's associated with the industry. So you can check that out on iTunes, Spotify. It's the MHP show, the Mobile Home Park Show. And then also, I'm going to give you guys, your listeners, access to my free webinar that I did. It starts you from the basics of mobile home park investing all the way up to deal underwriting and closing a deal. It's about an hour long. If you go to derekvickers.com/masterclass webinar, I can shoot that over to you, Demetri, and you can put it in the show notes. But if you check that out, it's a really good basic starting point also reach out to me at Derek at derekvickers.com with any questions. I also have a partnership program. If you want to partner on a deal or you need help with a deal, we have programs to where I partner with people on deals and help them take a deal to the finish line.
Well, that sounds like a winning formula. Thanks, Derek, and that's a wonderful value add. So I urge the audience that if this is something that's of interest to you, please look at the show notes and download that wonderful tool so that you can get stronger in the new year. Derek, I really want to thank you. And one last time, tell us again about your podcast and how to find it on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
Yeah, so it's called The MHP Show. MHP is Mobile Home Park Show, but it's MHP. So The MHP Show. And that's on Spotify, Podbean, iTunes. You can look it up and look up Derek Vickers. I'll probably pop up on there. And we're on YouTube. Check out the YouTube channel. We're doing vlogs now where I'm out at parks poking around and doing stuff. So we should have the first episode of the vlog releasing soon, but I've got clips of that on there now, and I've got other stuff on my YouTube channel. So check the YouTube out too. It's Derek Vickers on YouTube.
Well, Derek, I really want to thank you for being on the Relief Podcast today, and you keep acquiring more mobile home parks and making them better.
Yeah, man, Demetri, pleasure speaking with you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.